Good morning, everyone. So I think this batch has recently started, right? कौन से टॉपिक्स चल रहे हैं आपके और? Polity and geography. So history is, I will start ancient history today. My name is Abhishek. In next 8 to 10 classes, I think it shouldn't go up to 10 classes, but 8 to 9 classes perhaps, we will discuss about ancient history. So there are few basic questions which we should answer first before I actually jump into the syllabus. 2-3 questions. The first question is the relevance of this topic for examination. Second question is what are the sources which we need to refer to for UPSC examination. Okay, so let's answer these 2 questions. So the very first is relevance of this topic. So this topic is very important for prelims examination, not so for mains. Even though I will not say that it is irrelevant for mains examination. So if you look at the mains syllabus of paper 1, you will find that art and culture is mentioned, right? In terms of history, you will find that history of modern India and history of modern world, this is something which we need to study. But we do not have to study ancient and medieval history. But if you look at the questions, you will find that there are few questions which cannot be categorized as a question of art and culture, even in mains examination. One of the topics I'm going to teach today is Indus Valley Civilization. There was a question asked by UPSC in 2014 that what can we learn in today's world from the town planning of Indus Valley Civilization? Now this is not a question of art and culture, right? Similarly, there was another question that while other civilizations like Mesopotamian, Egyptian, Babylonian civilization, they perished, Indian civilization continued and we find threads of continuity. And you had to discuss that statement. So statement was given that other civilizations have perished, Indian civilization did not perish. And not only this, it did not perish, but we find that there is a continuity. Things which existed 2000 years ago, more than 2000 years ago, even they exist today. So you had to write a discussion on it. So again, this is not a question of art and culture per se. So you'll find that there are many questions like this. There was another question that how we can deconstruct history from the accounts of foreign travelers. How can we deconstruct ancient and medieval history, to be more specific. So even for mains, I will not say that it is not relevant. It is relevant, but not directly given in the syllabus. Okay? So in syllabus, you will find that art and culture, literature, all those things are important as per syllabus of mains examination. However, in prelims, it is directly mentioned in your syllabus. And in prelims, you can easily expect 3 to 4 questions. For example, this year there were 5 questions from ancient history, which is quite a good number, frankly. Sometimes they have also asked 6 questions, but there has also been a year where only 1 question has been asked. So, एक question तो देखो हर साल आएगा ancient history से. I am only categorizing question of ancient history. However, there is an overlap. Some question of art and culture can be categorized as a question of ancient history. So, I am being not being very generous here. So, either 1 question, at max 5 question, in fact 6 questions also, but not more than that. But even for this 5 question, the syllabus is quite huge. So you have to study a lot of things. So medieval history is very straightforward. Medieval history में बहुत सारा कुछ नहीं है. But in ancient history, because we have to trace such a large amount of history, and I am not only going to teach ancient history, but I am also going to teach some aspects of early medieval history. So this division of ancient, medieval, modern, this division of timeline, it's not very fixed. Yeah, इस year तक ancient है, इस year तक medieval है. But if you have to provide some range, then up till say for example 800, 900 AD, whatever happened, or 1000 AD in fact also, we study as part of ancient and early medieval history. So medieval history है, that starts with the establishment of Delhi Sultanate. So that is from 11th, 12th century. We study about Sultanate, Vijayanagar Empire, Mughals. And modern history we start from the death of Aurangzeb. That is in 1707. After the death of Aurangzeb, how Mughal Empire declined. And Britishers now became the most important power in India. So that is what we study in modern history. But ancient history goes way back. Ancient history actually goes back to the prehistory period. Prehistoric means something we do not have a written account, right? So we have to use our imagination based on the substances we find here and there, and we have to deconstruct history, that what were our ancestors like, what were they doing in their day-to-day life, how were they surviving, what was their subsistence strategy. So these are very important questions, right? So when we study, and see, history in general I think is a very difficult discipline. It seems very easy to study, right? It's a very easy subject to study, apart from the fact that it has a lot of facts. Especially it's not easy for you guys, because you have to memorize a lot of facts, and UPSC में maximum question जो history के होंगे वो factual questions ही होंगे, of course. So it's not easy to memorize a lot of facts, but it is definitely easy to read it. मतलब उसमें कुछ बहुत ज़्यादा समझना नहीं है, right? But whatever is happening, but we have to have just an open mind, and things will make a lot of sense. But history as a discipline to establish, I think that's a very difficult task to do. And even history as a discipline of modern history, I think that is even difficult. For example, what is the most important event which went on just few days back, and it is still going in the world? Russia-Ukraine crisis, right? Say for example 10 years down the line, when someone has to write, because today's international relation becomes tomorrow's world history. So if someone has to write about this story of Russia-Ukraine, it's not an easy task, that what exactly was happening, what led to this situation. It's not a very easy task, and given the fact that we have an account of every minute's development, har minute pe kya ho raha hai, we have an account of that. And even then, what is happening, why is it happening? In fact, what is happening is even a more difficult question. Why is it happening still can be answered. But what is happening, that's a more difficult question. Okay? However, why is it happening is also not that easy, because to establish causality means cause-effect relationship, that this is the effect, but this effect is because of these following reasons. So in history we do study causality, that a revolution occurred because of all these prevailing factors. So establishing this causality in itself is a very difficult task to do. And now we are talking about ancient history, something which we do not have a lot of record of. We have some written records, we have some archaeological sources. I will talk about sources of deconstructing ancient history. But it's a very difficult task to write about ancient history. So that's why I said that history is a difficult discipline to establish. But still it is a very important discipline. And I want you guys to answer why. Why do we study history? Why should we study history? That's a very cliche answer, to know about our past, but how does it help us? We can learn from the past, to learn from the mistakes of past, to learn about evolution, not from the biological perspective, but yeah, to learn about civilizations, for example, how humanity, sorry? That in itself is very interesting. So for example, curiosity in itself is a very big reason to study a discipline. That we are just very curious that how our ancestors used to live, what was their daily life like. We are now living in a surplus era, right? Food surplus hai, materialism pura bhara para hai. We are talking about an era where these things were not taken for granted. Okay. So studying history in itself is interesting because of curiosity. But yes, all these points that we have to study history, because there is a very famous quote by George Bernard Shaw, that history does not repeat itself, but it does rhyme. You'll find that there are themes in history, and these themes are interconnected. You'll find that same thing which is happening in, say for example, what is happening in Russia and Ukraine, or what is happening in India, or what is happening in Turkey, or whatever. You'll find that there are similarities. There are similarities across the world. जैसे एक बहुत simple सा एक theme होता है to study about authoritarian regimes. That people are going through a set of problems and they feel that there is some hero who is going to solve all these problems. And that leads to emergence of authoritarian regimes. And more than solving problems actually gets much bigger, right? Sometimes they do solve problems, This is also something which we need to know. Sometimes it occurs that authoritarian leaders, they do solve problem, but that number is so minuscule. For example, we study about Singapore. Singapore is a great example for that. But at the same time, there are so many examples where authoritarian leaders have screwed up things. They made things even worse. So, and you'll find that this theme resonates across the space, across the time. ये हमेशा लगता है, एक्सेट ऑफ पीपल को हमेशा लगेगा कि हाँ देयर इज सम हीरो जो कि ठीक कर देगा चीजों को, राइट? सो हिस्ट्री डज नॉट रिपीट इटसेल्फ, बट इट डज राइम. That is again a very interesting thing. Apart from that, history also perhaps teaches us empathy. The fact that we can appreciate what our ancestors were going through, how they lived their life, that tells us our place in the world. We take a lot of things for granted, right? But we have to understand the struggles. We are here because of our ancestors, right? And they struggled a lot in creating. So, एक चीज हम सबको अप्रिशिएट करने की जरूरत है. We are living in the best of times. We are living in the best of time. Our average age is more than 70, 80 years. Just few hundred years ago, our average age was not more than 50 years. Even before that, perhaps 30. Some wild animal could have killed you while you were hunting, right? So this is that's why history teaches us empathy also. Okay, it teaches us to be more and more curious. It teaches us to learn from our mistakes and not to repeat those mistakes in future, right? So I am going to start with ancient history. So the very first thing which I want to discuss is that how do we deconstruct ancient history? So ancient history also includes prehistory. I have not seen any question asked by UPSC from prehistory, but I do think that you should have some rough idea when we use the word prehistory, what does it mean? Can prehistory in itself be divided into different periods? So I will briefly talk about prehistory, but our major topic in today's class will be Indus Valley civilization. So I will briefly give you a structure how we are going to study this entire discipline. I will talk about Indus Valley civilization. I will talk about Aryan migration, Vedic civilization, early Vedic period, late Vedic period. Then we will talk about Mauryan Empire, because that is again a great empire we need to study. We will also talk about disintegration of Mauryan Empire and emergence of Gupta's empire after a few hundreds of years. At the same time, we will also discuss what is happening in southern part of the country, Cholas, Cheras and Pandyas, based on the Sangam literature which we have found. We will also talk about what is happening in the Deccan region, Satavahanas and other dynasties. So we are going to trace all this history across the region in a time period manner. ठीक है, तो हम जाएंगे linearly ही जाएंगे. तो linearly एक बार हम trace करेंगे major empire, then we will shift to, we will put our focus on different part of the country. Northeastern part is a part which we do not have lot of record about. So for example, we have lot of information of Northeast India since medieval times, but not before that. So we do know that yes, tribes, there were a lot of tribes. It was again a diverse culture जो है, that was definitely there. But we do not have lot of record what is happening in Northeast India, except starting from medieval history. So we do have, जैसे for example, I will tell you that the first thing I am going to discuss is what are the sources. ये जो I'm going to dictate a lot of things, but there are few things which you have to keep writing as I am writing on the board. So this is one of those things. So the first thing is, what will be the sources? What will be the sources to deconstruct history? Nipun is saying to get marks in exam, that's why we study ancient history. That's a very good reason for you. That's a well enough reason for you guys to study ancient history. Okay, so what are the sources? The first important source will be literary sources, of course. First important sources will be literary sources. This is something which you should know, that even though we have found written seals, written objects of Indus Valley civilization. I'm going to make you write this thing again. It remains undeciphered. We have not been able to decipher the script of Indus Valley civilization. So even though we have a written record, we do not know what does it mean. So the first written record which we actually know is Vedas. Vedas and the later literature associated with Vedas. For example, Vedangas and Upanishads, even Puranas, which are stories. However, this is very interesting. In fact, the second source can be Sanskrit epics themselves. For example, Mahabharata and Ramayana. But we have to be very cautious while using these sources as a source of history, because these are mythological stories, right? So, even though we do not know if, of course we do know that जो miraculous चीजें हैं, we can be very certain that they did not exist. But we can have a glimpse of the society. How was the society like? What was the position of women, for example? Right? How people were living. So we do not have to use this as a source of, so for example, this particular dynasty existed. But we can develop a lot of understanding about what was the society like. So when we are interpreting these epics as a source of history, we have to be very cautious, right? जैसे एक बहुत important source है to learn about history of Kashmir is a book called Raj Tarangini. It was written by Kalhan. Kalhan compiled the history of Kashmir. Now Raj Tarangini is a book which is quite amazing because there is still a debate that should it be considered as a historical source. For example, Raj Tarangini gives a very accurate description of lot of dynasties which ruled Kashmir, but at the same time it talks about magicians, जादू, टोना, ऐसी चीजों के बारे में बात होती है. Right? So we have to be very cautious while we are trying to decrypt history from these sources. Puranas are of course also a source. What are other literary sources? Sorry? हाँ, Aranyaks, बिल्कुल Aranyaks. So a lot of literary sources. I will give you a brief introduction about when we discuss about Vedic civilization. However, this is part of art and culture syllabus. तो art and culture में और ज़्यादा आपको डिटेल में पढ़ाया जाएगा. But धर्म शास्त्रास, like social code of conduct, how a person should behave. Sangam literature to know about especially Tamil country. So Sangam literature and later Tamil literature, that is again a very, very important source. Later Kannada and Telugu literature. Buddhist and Jain literature, this is again a very important source. What else as part of literary sources? Vedas and later parts, वो वहाँ पे हम cover करेंगे. Foreign travelers. This is again a very, very important source. Lot of foreigners came to India and wrote about India, both in ancient times, medieval times, as well as in modern history. So for example, we know about history from the writings of Ahyan, from Zhuangzang, from the writings of Al-Biruni, Ibn Battuta. All of these are very important foreign travelers who gave a detailed account of what life was like in India at the same time, which were the important dynasties which were ruling different part of the country at different time periods. So yes, foreign travelers and their accounts. अच्छा, हमने सोर्सेस की बात नहीं करी कि कहाँ से पढ़ना है. हाँ? ठीक है, कोई बात नहीं, अभी एक बार कर लेते हैं, then we will discuss about sources. So these are more or less literary sources which are important to deconstruct history. But apart from literary sources, another very important source will be archaeological sources. Many sites have been found, and those sites give you a very good idea about what this civilization was like. And we can further, this is very important to understand, that all the sources which I am going to discuss here horizontally, they need to be studied together to deconstruct the history. So for example, something we have found in part of literary sources, but if we have archaeological evidence for that, then that gets authenticated. Ki whatever is written is actually accurate. So archaeological sources again very important. For example, dating archaeology as well as their interpretation. That is very important. Another very important source is epigraphy. Study of language and scripts. So linguistics भी मैं बोल सकता हूँ. Study of language and scripts. Early languages, scripts. देखो ये जो linguistic analysis है ना, this is very very helpful in deconstructing history. Language, the fact that we are speaking is in itself a miracle. जैसे हम human intelligence की बात करते हैं, that why are we intelligent? One of the reason we are intelligent is that we have linguistic capabilities. We can communicate with each other, and we can communicate lot of people. For example, this entire class is listening to me, and is going to listen to me for next 3 hours because of linguistic capabilities. The fact that we can cooperate among each other, and language has played a very important role. 15 chimpanzees cannot cooperate together. More than 15 chimpanzees. Right? So this is in fact what differentiates us from other animals, that we can cooperate. Modi ji announce करेंगे कि 500 खत्म, 1000 खत्म, 1.3 billion people will accept that decision. Right? So we can cooperate at such a larger scale. This is not possible in case of any other species. And the study of language in itself is very interesting. जैसे recently I came to know about a fact. एक type of sound होता है which is called retroflex sound. जैसे for example when we say to and tho. When we say to, आप to बोल के देखो, we curl our tongue. To, tho, we curl our tongue, right? This does not exist. Don't do that. घर पे जाके कर लेना. This does not exist anywhere in the world except South Asia. Such type of sound is called retroflex sound. ये South Asia के अलावा और कहीं पे exist नहीं करता. So the linguistic analysis of this also plays a very very important role in deconstructing history. Another very important source is numismatics, that is study of coins. Let's say for example we can know about a civilization, their trade, we can know about their prosperity by just studying of coins. For example, we know that Gupta coinage was one of the most developed coinage system. And even before Gupta, Kanishk, when Kanishk was ruling India, a significant part of India, a Kushana ruler, the purity of gold coin was the best, not to be found anywhere in the world. There is a reason there is a Tanishk owned by Tata. The Tanishk जो नाम है, that comes from Kanishk. T represents Tata. And बाकी जो part है, that is taken from Kanishk, because Kushanas had the best of gold coins. Right? So coinage does tell us a lot about prosperity, trade, all these things about a civilization. For example, we find coinage of one region into other civilizations. So by doing that, we can deconstruct that, okay, there were trade relationships also. Okay? So numismatic study of coins. And a very important source which you will not find in ancient history textbooks. Maybe 5 years, 10 years down the line, this will become part of your regular school textbook. A very new discipline which is emerging. And this discipline has played a very important role in deconstructing history, which is called population genetics. Population genetics is a branch of genetics which studies how one group of population is related to another group of population, and in fact within a group of population how people are related to each other. Okay, so population genetics is playing a very, very important role in answering a lot of questions about ancient history, from where we came from. For example, we do know that all of us came from Africa. All of us came from Africa. जो first human beings है, sapiens. We are Homo sapiens. Homo is our genus. Homo genus के बाकी जो भी species हैं, they perished. Only we survived. So for example, Neanderthals, Homo erectus, Denisovans, all these other species of Homo, they did not survive. Sapiens survived. Okay. So this in itself is very interesting. That why is it so? Why only sapiens? There is a very famous book called Sapiens, in fact, written by Yuval Noah Harari. कभी टाइम मिले अभी नहीं. जैसे एंथ्रोपोलॉजी वाले अगर कोई है एंथ्रोपोलॉजी के, हाँ तो आप तो ऐसे ही पढ़ सकते हो. एंथ्रोपोलॉजी के लिए तो खुद बहुत अच्छी किताब है, ऐसे ही पढ़ लेना चाहिए. इन जनरल आई थिंक एवरीबडी शुड रीड दैट बुक, बट नॉट राइट नाउ. अभी यूपीएससी के लिए आप प्रिपेयर कर रहे हो. So it answers this question that why sapiens survived and other species of Homo genus did not. But another many important questions. For example, who were Harappans? Where did they go after their decline? A great civilization, unmatched in its time. For 700 years, the civilization prospered, but then it declined. So where did they go? Are we related to Harappans? Are North Indians and Dravidians, South Indians different? Such questions has been answered, which was being speculated by people. Now it actually has been answered. We have a definitive answer using science. So it turns out that yes, we do owe our ancestry to Harappans, both North Indians and South Indians. Dravidian culture, perhaps the linguistic capability of Harappan people, and again this is only a guess, it is not a proven thing, but it is only a good guess that linguistic culture of Harappan people went to southern India, which led to development of Dravidian languages. But when Aryans came, they mingled with, maybe there was, of course there must be some sort of conflict must have been there, but there was no invasion. That is again a very important political question. Those who are very interested in history, they must be knowing about it. That एक पूरा theory था that why Harappan civilization perished, and the theory was that Aryans invaded India and in a large scale conflict people of Harappas were killed and they were replaced by Aryans. Now this theory has been debunked using so many sources. One of those sources is population genetics, that both North Indian and South Indians owe their ancestry to people of Indus Valley civilization. Also Aryans, also many other migrations. So this is also very interesting thing to, when we study history, हमारा बहुत सारा ignorance है, तो we get rid of lot of ignorance associated with lot of questions of history, which does not in our current times, they are not a question of history, but they are political questions. The history of humanity is history of migration. All of us are migrants. So anybody says that, okay, this person is Indian, or this person is more Indian, or this person is less Indian. Don't do that. That doesn't make any sense, right? So जब ये बोलते हैं कि हाँ, जैसे जो right wing historians हैं, they always have made this allegation that it was a project of Britishers to divide Indians based on Dravidian and North Indian lines. ठीक है, हो सकता है. Maybe that was their ulterior motive. But now the problem with right-wing historian is, that has been debunked, so they were right. The Dravidian or North Indian जो पूरा theory है, this is not a correct theory. But at the same time, जो current right-wing historians का issue है, is that they are not willing to accept that Aryans migrated. And Aryans migrated in a large group about 3000 years ago, and they settled in India, in Ganga Doab region. They mingled with the local population, and this is, so for example, when we say that who we are as Indians, we owe our ancestry first to Africans who first migrated from the African continent, then Indus Valley civilization, then Aryans, other migrations also. So, but they are not willing to accept it. But this is, in fact, population genetics has answered this question, that Aryans did migrate. A set of migration from Central Asian, West Asian region happened towards India. At the same time, The migration also happened towards Europe. These groups were called Aryans. And they were a linguistic group because they spoke a common language. And this common language is known as a group of language known as Indo-European language. And Sanskrit is one of the Indo-European languages. So a lot of जो myths हैं, जो WhatsApp forwards होते हैं कि Sanskrit is mother of all the languages of world. That's a myth. Sanskrit is not the mother of all languages of the world. Sanskrit plays a very important role in the development of many languages in India, but it is not a mother of all languages of the world. So a lot of such myths are debunked when we study history, right? For example, Aryan invasion theory has been debunked, but at the same time, accepting the fact that we all are migrants, this is very important. And I often think that why there is so resistance against Aryan migration theory. And I might be wrong, but I have a theory. The theory, so for example, the right-wing historians, a lot of right-wing historians are also associated with Hindutva groups. And Hindutva group का एक हमेशा एक agenda रहा है to consider Muslims as others. That they are the one who came later to India. We are the original Indians, Muslims are not. But even that is wrong, right? We all, कोई भी ये claim करता है कि हाँ ये Indian है और ये Indian नहीं है. That is a very stupid thing to say. So this entire project that we are more Indians than Muslims, Hindus are more Indians than Muslims, that gets debunked when you accept Aryan migration theory. So perhaps there is a lot of resistance against this. So I'm actually answering a very politically sensitive question. Right? If I say this on Twitter, I will be trolled. बहुत सारे trolls होंगे जो बिल्कुल कि कुछ भी नहीं पता है इसका कुछ भी बोल रहा है. These are 50 तरीके की चीजें होंगी. Right? But this is a fact. So population genetics has answered a lot of questions. For example, it has answered a question, very important question, that when does caste system starts in India? It turns out that caste system did not came with migration of Aryans. When Aryans came, caste system was not there. Caste system actually developed around 100 AD because one of the feature of caste system is endogamy. Right? Marriages within caste. Of this endogamy, this proof of endogamy, using population genetics analysis, we have found that it starts around 100 AD. Hundreds of years after Aryan migration. So when Aryans came, there was no caste system at that time, but gradually, perhaps as a political project to divide people into social hierarchies, to consolidate power, and as a religious, so for example, politics and religion go hand in hand. Past में भी हुआ है, अभी भी हो रहा है, right? So maybe perhaps as a political tool to use religion, a social hierarchy was created, mobility was restricted, that a Shudra will never become a Vaishya or Kshatriya or Brahman, so that is Varna. Caste and Varna although are different things. But there will be only endogamy, just for example, is a very important feature. So we have answer to this question that when does caste system start? So population genetics, the reason I have mentioned here, this is fairly a very new branch of studying history, to deconstruct history. This is fairly a new branch, so it has not been institutionalized as part of our normal textbooks, but again I will recommend another very, very interesting book called Early Indians, written by Tony Joseph. बहुत ही अच्छी किताब है, अगर टाइम मिले कभी तो आप पढ़ सकते हो. It tells you about who are we as Indians. Okay, so it uses population genetics in this analysis. So everything which I have told you right now about caste system, about ancestry of Indians, these are conclusions of the book written by Tony Joseph. But I will rely on population genetics more than interpretations of historians. That is another difficulty in study history, because all historians have biases, right? And when I interpret a particular event, I will interpret based on my own biases, how we perceive that world occurs. For example, a left-wing historian will perceive everything as a social struggle, right? A right-wing historian will be more conservative. So historians have biases, but science does not have biases, right? So population genetics for me is in fact is a better source to understand a lot of questions which till now have not been answered. So I don't think, ये बस मैंने खाली एक as a to generate curiosity मैंने बताया. Do not think UPSC is going to ask a question from population genetics, but as a aware citizen, I think you guys should know about it. Anyways, before I jump to any doubt, any questions, if you have anything you would like to add here. Sorry? हाँ, we can say that. So, yes. So, in fact, ये जो वेदास हैं, जो literary sources है, Vedas were not written down initially. जो written part, I will come to this part. जो written part है, Vedas were part of oral history. For example, you listen to the Vedic verses from your father, from your grandfather, and you remember it, right? And this tradition went on. So Vedas and many other literary sources, they are actually part of oral tradition, and later they were written down. So yes, that is correct. Anyways, before I jump to Indus Valley civilization, let's talk about prehistory. Let's talk about when we are hunter-gatherers. We have not settled into villages yet. We are still dependent on sources. Sorry. First of all, UPSC के लिए क्या आप sources use कर सकते हो? So a very important source can be a very very thin book. बहुत जल्दी में अगर आप हैं, नहीं पढ़ना ancient history, but फिर तो कुछ तो पढ़ के जाएं for satisfaction. You can study this book, old NCERT of class 6th. Old NCERT, class 6th, written by Romila Thapar. पतली सी किताब है, मार्केट में मिल जाएगा इजीली. आप एक रीडिंग में पढ़ सकते हो. But a very good source. But the source which I am going to recommend that you should study is again an old NCERT, but for class 11th, R.A. Sharma. R.A. Sharma की किताब है. This is much more comprehensive. Romila Thapar is like a crash course. R.A. Sharma is more comprehensive. This is like R.A. Sharma is foundation batch. तो आप ऐसे समझ लो. So my recommendation will be that study R.A. Sharma. अगर आपको सिर्फ एक बुक पढ़ना है and only read one book, so R.A. Sharma is more than sufficient. If any of you is studying Tamil Nadu board textbook, that is also quite good. तो ancient India, both for ancient and medieval आप पढ़ सकते हो. Ancient India, अगर आपने ये पढ़ा है तो आर.ए. शर्मा पढ़ने की जरूरत नहीं है. वेरी वेल रिटन बुक, यू कैन स्टडी. अनदर वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट सोर्स इज न्यू एनसीईआरटीज. जो न्यू एनसीईआरटीज हैं, बट द प्रॉब्लम विद न्यू एनसीईआरटीज दैट इवन दो आई थिंक दीज आर फैंटास्टिकली रिटन, बहुत अच्छी किताबें हैं, बट दे आर नॉट कॉम्प्रिहेंसिव एट ऑल. They will only give you glimpses of ancient, medieval or modern history. So जो new NCERTs हैं, वो class 6, 7th और 8th में they have been divided as our pasts 1, our pasts 2, our pasts 3. So our pasts 1 talks about ancient history, 2 talks about medieval, 3 talks about modern history. तो जो new NCERT class 6th का है, which is our pasts 1. This is again a very good book. And class 11th में भी same चीज repeat होती है, themes in Indian history. But class 11th में 3 किताबें एक साथ, themes in Indian history 1, 2 and 3. 1 is ancient history. So again new NCERT. Which is themes in Indian history. So if I have to choose only one source, I will choose the book written by R.A. Sharma. बहुत comprehensive book है. New NCERTs, even though I think they are beautifully written, बहुत interesting book है, बहुत interesting तरीके से लिखा हुआ है, but they are not comprehensive at all. They will only give you glimpses. So just for out of curiosity, and but again they are very thin, आप आराम से खत्म कर सकते हो 2-3 दिन में. If you have some extra time, आप 2-3 दिन में ये our pasts पढ़ लो. 2-3 दिन क्या, I think 1 day is perhaps even more than sufficient. It's quite a thin book. Themes in Indian history is little thick, but again it can be finished in 2-3 days. But main source will be R.S. Sharma. So these are some of the sources. If you have to, this is my recommendation. Comprehensively written and again very beautifully written. Okay, let's talk about prehistoric period. Hanji. Caste system is not there. In early Vedic period, caste system is not there.
In the 10th mandala of Veda, Varna system is there. Then, sir, how can we say that the traces of caste system evolves in the 100 AD?
I just answered 100 AD.
Yes.
I just told you that we find this answer from population genetics. Endogamy is a very important feature of caste system. We already knew that caste system did not. Anyways, I will talk about Vedic civilization in the next class. But I will briefly answer your question. First of all, we already have known that caste system did not exist in early Vedic period. So Rig Vedic period जिसको हम बोलते हैं. In Rig Vedic period, Varnas are there, social mobility is there, caste system is not there. This we already knew from the written resources also. This became so first we need to understand the difference between Varnas and caste. Those who have sociology as optional, बहुत detail में आप ये study करोगे. या anthropology as an optional, you will study this in detail. That how Varna system and caste system, how they are different. So Varna system, later caste becomes institutionalized, where social mobility is completely restricted. Person of one caste, who especially belongs to lower caste, cannot become an upper caste. So this becomes institutionalized in the later Vedic period. Okay, so we have answer to this question from written sources also and further verified by population genetics. So early Vedic period में caste system is not there. Okay? So caste system, frankly, it has been very costly not only on social and political. It has a social cost, it has a political cost. So by the way, the population genetics, this also plays a very important role in understanding a very simple, which we already knew, that there is no group which can be considered as somehow supreme to other group. That whites are supreme or Brahmins are supreme. So any group who claims that they have supremacy over other group, that does not make any sense. Because we all have common ancestry. So apart from the fact that caste system has been very costly at social arena as well as it has a political cost, it divided our country, it still divides our country. It also has a human cost, and that human cost is that mixing of populations plays a very important role in evolution. So maybe we as an Indian could have achieved much more had there been no endogamy. यहाँ एक सिर्फ और सिर्फ आपको same caste में marriage करना, same caste में शादी करनी है. Okay? So we as a population could have achieved much more if that was not the case. There is a very famous book, again based on population genetics, but it does not answer just question about India but across the world where we came from. It talks about that India has 1.3 billion population, but it is not a large 1.3 billion population. It is a set of small populations who are genetically different from each other because for hundreds of years, these small groups are marrying among themselves. So apart from the fact that it has a social cost and it has a political cost, it also has a human cost. Anyways, prehistory. So prehistory, first of all, is where we do not have any written record. Whatever we are trying to deconstruct, we are trying to deconstruct from archaeological sources. Okay? So we are talking about early human beings when hunting and gathering is the main survival strategy, right? People used to live in caves. Agriculture had not been, leave institutionalization, agriculture perhaps was not known. So based on what type of tools we use, so this era, this entire prehistory is called Stone Age. Stone Age because we used stone as tools for our survival. But even how stone tools became more and more sophisticated, based on that we divide entire prehistory into three periods. The first period is called Paleolithic period, the second period is called Mesolithic period, and the third is called Neolithic. So prehistory, आप एक line लिख सकते हो. We divide Indian Stone Age in three ages. On the basis of geological age, stone tools, and subsistence base. Subsistence basically means day-to-day survival. आप कैसे कर रहे हो? For example, we use this word for a lot of our farmers even today. A lot of small and marginal farmers, they adopt a subsistence strategy that somehow we are producing enough to feed our family. There is no agricultural surplus. So Paleolithic, first is Paleolithic. Paleolithic, Mesolithic, Neolithic. Give the heading Paleolithic age. Paleolithic age. So write down, it is further divided into lower Paleolithic period, a lower Paleolithic age. It is further divided into lower Paleolithic age, which goes from 2 million years ago to 100,000 BC. Middle, so lower, middle Paleolithic age, which goes from 100,000 BC to 40,000 BC. And upper Paleolithic age, which goes from 40,000 BC to 10,000 BC. The fundamental difference here is about stone tools. They became, as initially the stone tools are very irregular. कोई भी पत्थर उठा लिया. Later people started sharpening them, giving them some shape, triangular shape, rectangular shape. So they were given some sort of regular shape too. Again, the main purpose is hunting and gathering. So I'll write down in few bullet points here. People lived as hunter-gatherers. People lived as hunter-gatherers. Hunter-gatherers. Early life started at the foothills of mountains. Early life started at the foothill of mountains. Foothills of mountains, where the river was narrow, and easy to cross compared to the plains. compared to the plains. देखो water is again a very important requirement, and we also have to move from one place to another place. So initial life started at the foothills of mountains. Caves were, write down in next bullet point, caves were the natural places of residence. Caves were natural places of residence. Gradually, next bullet point, gradually stone tools started becoming smaller and more refined. Stone tools started becoming smaller and more refined. If you go and just Google Paleolithic sites of India, you will find hundred of sites. Hundred of sites we have found remains. So Paleolithic sites, I don't feel that you need to know the name of Paleolithic sites, except few perhaps. For example, there is a place in Karnataka called Ismapur. Ismapur is very famous because it was a center of tool for stone manufacturing. Even in Paleolithic period, we find evidences. Why do we know that it was a center of stone tool manufacturing? Because of the excess number of tools which has been found at this site. तो आप लिख सकते हो, जैसे एक एग्जाम्पल अगर आपको लिखना हो, Ismapur in Karnataka was a center of stone tool manufacturing. Okay, I will go slow. I think am I going really fast? Okay, I will go slow. Aman and Priyanka, they are also saying the same thing. Ismapur in Karnataka was a center of stone tool manufacturing. Other important sites are Sohan Valley in Pakistan. Sohan Valley. Sohan Valley in Pakistan, comma, Belan Valley in Mirzapur, UP. Belan Valley. Mirzapur, UP. So Paleolithic period actually covers a significant time duration. See, we study history, there are many nuances to history. जैसे हमारा बहुत एक, in general we develop this habit that we want simple explanation of things. That's why we are very prone to accepting facts which is in line with our political ideology. I'm very sure all of you know about this term called confirmation bias. Right? Confirmation bias ये होता है कि whatever we study, if it is along with our own ideology, how we perceive the world, then we tend to believe that study we feel that, okay, this seems more accurate. But the moment we study something which does not align with our thought process, then that creates a dissonance. Because we have our own perspective about the world, and suddenly I find something which challenges that perspective. So it creates a dissonance. But real intellectual development occurs when we are willing to accept that dissonance. However, I must warn you that this confirmation bias never goes away. So any person who claims that they do not have political bias is lying. कोई political bias होगा ही होगा, उसमें कोई है ही नहीं. Based on your socialization, based on the type of people you meet, based on your family environment, we develop a perspective about world at very young age, right? तो जो initial development है वो बहुत fast होता है. Gradually there will hear from here and there, things will settle down. But after a time, this perception about world almost flattens. We try to find, so for example, a very simple tendency is that we try to find simple explanations. Okay, if this is happening, ये तो ऐसे. This people is poor because he is lazy. This is a very simple explanation. But we do study that that is not the case. Someone is poor is because of, there can be a number of factors. Simple explanations are often not the correct explanation despite what the saying says. बोलते हैं ना? The easiest explanation is the correct explanation. But in many cases, simplest explanations are not very easy. So history, for example, I talked about such a huge period with such simple words. But we do need to understand that there must be many nuances here. There must have been many conflicts, many people would have died, different reasons would have developed a different type of culture. But we have no way of knowing the nuances of these different types of culture. So we try to portray a very simple picture, right? Anyways, next is Mesolithic age. Give this heading, Mesolithic age. Mesolithic age. It is from 10,000 to 6,000 BC. तो जो मेजोलिथिक एज का जो सबसे आउटस्टैंडिंग फीचर है, जो distinguishing feature है, that is use of microliths, a type of stone tools were developed known as microliths. Microliths are very small things, pointy things. For example, if I have to create an arrow, bow and arrow was a very important weapon. So arrow का जो part है, which actually pierces an animal, that has to be strong, at the same time it has to create enough pressure. So this was the time when microliths were started building, which can exert lot of pressure. Even though force is same, I hope force and pressure का difference clear है. Pressure is force per unit area. Right, so even though force is same, the pressure is really, really high, so that it can pierce an animal very easily. So microliths are the distinguishing feature of Mesolithic age. So just write it down. Hunting gathering stone age. This was also a hunting gathering stone age. This was also a hunting gathering stone age, marked by the use of microliths. Marked by the use of microliths. But देखो, this is also a time when early small houses made of bamboo, big grasses, as well as early signs of agriculture, not a proper planned agriculture, but an early sign of agriculture is witnessed. तो आप ये लिख सकते हो, domestication of animals like sheep, goats, dogs, sheeps, goats, dogs, and early sign of agriculture has been witnessed. Crops like early signs of agriculture has been witnessed. Crops like wheat and barley were grown. I'm going to tell you about a very important source of history, and that is study of burials. How people were buried after someone is dead. That's a very important source of history, because especially it tells you about the social hierarchy, about the institutions. People who were perhaps richer, kings and queens and nobles, their burial sites, they often were decorated more, while the commoner burial sites, they were not. So burial sites is a very important feature to deconstruct history, right? So for example, in Mesolithic age, you also find the first evidences of proper burials. अभी तक ऐसे था कि somebody died, left behind. Okay, but now we find evidences of first burials. तो आप लिख सकते हो, first evidence of disposal of dead, first evidence of disposal of dead in the form of burials, have been found. In the form of burials have been found. For example, rock shelters of Mirzapur. Again, Mirzapur I am going to revisit. So rock shelter of For example, rock shelters of, sorry, लाइट का करना है कुछ, एसी. अच्छा, बहुत गर्मी हो रखी है ना. अच्छा, मैं बोलता हूँ, इवन आई एम, मैं बोलता हूँ किसी को. हाँ, प्लीज प्लीज आस्क समवन. अच्छा, by the way, Mesolithic time is also a period when the expression in art emerged. So in art and culture you will study in detail about Bhimbetka paintings. जैसे मध्य प्रदेश में there is a place called Bhimbetka. So Bhimbetka is a very famous Mesolithic site. In the caves of Bhimbetka you find beautiful paintings, geometrical lines, figurines of hunting scenes, dancing, people gathering around a fire and celebration, some sort of celebration is also there. Also you find some abstract painting which does not describe a particular event, but it is an artistic expression in itself. So this is also a time when the expression in art, maybe it existed before, we do not know, but we have found Mesolithic art which is preserved even today. That also talks about the development in technology. For example, these paintings have survived even today. So that tells you the developments in technology of that time. So this will be discussed in detail in art and culture classes, but write it down. The expression in art, sorry. अभी तक कहाँ थे? I told you. So basically, first of all of these are stone ages. I told you the three reasons. सबसे पहला लाइन हमने क्या लिखा था? देखो, we divide this age based on a geological time period on stone age and subsistence strategy. So subsistence strategy, how you are going to survive. So for example, Paleolithic is when stone tools are not very regular. In Mesolithic, they became microliths. Microliths which ensured more efficient hunting. But at the same time, जो subsistence strategy है, agriculture has been introduced. और जो Neolithic period है, which I will be discussing, is when the agriculture and domestication of animals actually have been institutionalized. Right? So all of these are related to Stone Age. Stone Age basically means that we do not know about metals till now. So the first metal which we got to know about is known as Chalcolithic period. Right? So Chalcolithic period is when copper was known. But before we knew about metals, we still have to hunt animals. So for stone tools were used. Okay? So we divide this classification based on the type of stone tools and based on the type of subsistence strategies. What are we using? What is our strategy for survival? Okay? That's a good question. So he's asking that how can we differentiate? So first of all, we try to archaeological sources जो हैं, सबसे पहले we will try to carbon date them. For example, how old they are, right? And we do find a similarity. So for example, if there is a site, say for example in Jammu and Kashmir, another site is in Karnataka. But we do find a similarity that even though they are very far away from each other, there was no way that these two set of people were contacting with each other. But still we find similarities in the type of weapons they used. So first thing which we carbon date them. Using carbon dating we find the age of these tools, and then we find the development. So for example, if tools are more sharpened, if they are more regular in shape, so they can lead to more efficient hunting. So based on that, we divide this time period. So as I told you, this is not a process which happened in 50 years or 100 years. It happened in thousands of years, right? So एक मैंने बीच में यही बोल रहा था ना मैं कि ये इतना बड़ा पीरियड मैंने बड़े सिंपल कुछ सेंटेंसेस में लिखा दिया, बट ऑफ कोर्स देयर आर मच मोर nuances than that. But for your perspective, for UPSC perspective, you should know that this differentiation of Mesolithic, Neolithic or Paleolithic, that is simply based on the type of tools people used and the types of strategy they adopted for their survival. And we have a fair understanding of what type of strategies they adopted. We can deconstruct the history. Okay? What do you mean by microliths? Microliths are type of tools. I will show you. I do not have a picture of microliths right now, but it's very simple. I will show you. एक बस एक पहले लिख लो. Mesolithic, the artistic expression, एक लाइन हम लिख रहे थे, the artistic expression such as festivals, dances, hunting scenes, even abstract paintings. Even abstract paintings have been found at many sites. इसमें example you should know, few examples you should know. Bhimbetka in Madhya Pradesh, Lakhudiyar caves in Uttarakhand, Jaora is another cave in Madhya Pradesh. These are some of the places where we have found artistic expression. Sorry? Jaora. I don't know how to pronounce it. It's Jaora, right? Drashti is asking, can I read Ancient Past by R.A. Sharma, Oxford edition? So R.A. Sharma, I think, जो old NCERTs are now they have been republished by other publishers, but I don't think it is by Oxford. I think it is by Black Swan. Black Swan publish करती है ना? या Oxford publish करती है? I really do not recall, but yes, if it is an ancient past by R.A. Sharma, आप पढ़ सकते हो. Aruna is asking, why do we need to categorize Stone Age? Why do we need to categorize history per se for that matter? So we want to understand how things are evolving. So the answer to this question is very simple. Why? I told you, why do we study history? We study history, that was the first question I asked you. We study history because we are curious how humans developed, how they evolved. And based on how they evolved, we can categorize the evolutionary phases. And last is Neolithic. From 10,000 to 6,000 BC. Sorry? Sorry. Write down in bullet points. A shift in subsistence strategy. A shift in subsistence strategy from hunting and gathering to animal rearing and agriculture started. A shift in subsistence strategy from hunting and gathering to animal rearing and agriculture started. So now this is the time, just for example, we talk about planting a crop versus agriculture. They both are different things. When I am saying domestication of plants and domestication of animals, so domestication of plants basically will mean that not only I am producing for the current generation, but I am also leaving some seed for the next set of crops. So that is when, this is the time when domestication of plants started. Domestication of animals started. We are now carrying animals with us. जैसे जो डॉग्स हैं, एक मैंने रिसेंटली बड़ा एक इंटरेस्टिंग सा जोक पढ़ा था. डॉग्स इवॉल्व फ्रॉम वोल्व्स, राइट? सो टू डॉग्स टॉकिंग टू ईच अदर, दैट फ्रॉम व्हाट डिड वी इवॉल्व? एंड द डॉग रिप्लाइज वुल्फ. एंड व्हाट अबाउट आवर मास्टर्स? मंकी. एंड डॉग इज लाइक गजब बेइज्जती है. So right, so dogs evolved from wolves. Some wolves who thought that if we, rather than attacking human beings, if we can eat the leftovers, and in millions of years those wolves became dogs, right? So domestication of animals basically is that we are carrying animals with us with a purpose, that they will give us wool, they will give us milk and even meat in the time of requirement. Write down the next bullet point. Agriculture was needed to meet the needs of growing population. Agriculture was needed to meet the need of growing population. Agriculture was needed to meet the needs of growing population. There is a very, very important site in this regard, which is in Balochistan, Pakistan as of now. The name of the village is called Mehergarh, if you have heard about the village. So Mehergarh is considered to be the first village settlement in the Indian subcontinent region. तो आप लिख सकते हो, in fact, this marked the coming of first village in Mehergarh, Pakistan. Right now it is in the Balochistan province. Controlled use of fire was known by this period. Controlled use of fire was known by this period. Pots were initially made by hand. Write down last point. Pots were initially made by hand. Pots were initially made by hand. But with the invention of wheel pottery, but with the invention of wheel pottery, making pot as art was further refined. Making pot as art was further refined. So you can imagine initial pots simply उनका एक purpose होगा to store grain, but gradually we started giving them some not only regular shape, but we started decorating them with different shapes and different motifs. Right? So this is also the time when pottery developed. There is another very important site in India which you should know. We have found many underground pits here, which is Barzoham in Jammu and Kashmir. Now initially there was a lot of debate that why these underground pits are here. So many historians are aware of the opinion that perhaps it served a very important purpose, that people went to these pits during winter. But now this theory has been debunked. More historians now believe that these underground pits were to store grain, because this was the time when people are producing surplus food, right? अभी subsistence से हम surplus की तरफ जा रहे हैं. So this was the time when surplus food was produced, and that's why underground pits were dug. तो आप लिख सकते हो Burzum Burzum, sorry, it's not correct. In Jammu and Kashmir. It is known for underground pits. It is known for underground pits. It is known for underground pits, which was perhaps used for storing surplus grain, which was perhaps used for storing surplus grain. Let's take a break here. After the break, we will talk about Indus Valley civilization, the first civilization, the first urban civilization of the world. Hello, welcome back. So the main topic which I think is very important for both prelims and mains examination is Indus Valley civilization. So give this heading. Indus Valley civilization. Before I start this topic, this word civilization, what does it mean? What do you mean by civilization? Settlement of people in a particular time. Okay, that can be a village also. Evolution of living of people. Okay. Decent manner. What do you mean by decent manner? Define decent manner. In an organized manner. Okay. Some sort of organization, some sort of governance system. Culture. What else? Religious practices. Okay, ठीक है. हाँ, religious practices often. Economic system, a well-defined economic system. That's a very important point. So, proper housing. Sorry? A defined way of living. Again, defined way of living can also be said for hunter-gatherers because they also had a defined way of living. But how do I distinguish that from a civilizational defined way of living? So, first of all, civilization per se does not have an exact definition anywhere. Civilization has a very abstract connotation. When I use the word civilization, I cannot define civilization. I cannot say that it actually means this. But there are definitely some distinguishing features when we use the word civilization in common parlance. The civilization as an English word versus civilization when I use in history, there are some distinguishing features. For example, often civilizations are associated with urban settlements, an urban settlement. Civilizations are associated with not only agriculture as the major mode of activity, as someone pointed out, other forms of economic activity. For example, people who are into crafts, people who are merchants, who are trading. These are again aspects of civilization. Civilization also means some sort of governance system, that a large people are following same set of rules and regulations which have been set by some sort of organization. It can be a king, it can be a group of elected people, that is a republic, it can be anything. But there is some sort of rules and regulations which is being followed by a larger set of people. Civilization can also mean, one of the distinguishing features is that large buildings, for example, it can be a temple or it can be a palace, right? So, even though civilization has a very abstract connotation, some distinguishing features when we use the word civilization from historical perspective, we can definitely point out. More population, agricultural surplus, बहुत सारी चीजें. So by the way, civilization again does not prop up anywhere, anytime. यहां पे भी दो थ्योरीज हैं that how civilizations come into existence. One theory says that things happen incrementally. Gradually things evolve. And from gradually across over a large time period, a civilization will come into existence where there is, say, for example, agricultural surplus. That agricultural surplus will lead to other type of economic activities, which can be patronized. For example, on agricultural surplus, when people feel this need that we need to organize themselves into group, we need to have some rules and regulations. The moment we do that, we also need to have some sort of authority. Now that authority, to maintain its authority, also requires some money. Where will that money come from? Initially it will come from agricultural tax, as a form of tax on agricultural produce. Then other forms of tax, for example, tax on different professions, tax on trade such as custom duty. So we will develop an economic system also. But agricultural surplus always has been a causal factor behind establishment of any civilization. पहले excess food होगा तभी जाके आप बाकी चीजों के बारे में सोचोगे. अगर food नहीं है तो आप वही hunter gatherer अब बने रहोगे. So anyways, one of the theories is that gradual development. Another theory is that things happen incrementally, but for a very short span of time, suddenly exponential change occurs. And that exponential change has played very important role in many civilizations. And in fact, the second theory is now a more accepted theory. That yes, things are happening gradually. For example, Paleolithic period comprises of thousands of years. Right? Mesolithic period shorter, Neolithic period even shorter. But from Mesolithic to Chalcolithic period, when we got to know about first metals, copper, tin, lead, these are the first metal we got to know about them. The development seems very rapid. But again the development declined. For example, Indus civilization jo hai, it is often categorized into three phases. Early phase, when there were rural settlements, many villages started coming together around Indus and its tributaries. Gradually cities emerged, which is what we know as mature phase of Indus Valley civilization. But that existed for 700 years, by the way, and it is unique. The Indus civilization hai, there is no comparison of Indus civilization with any other contemporary civilizations, and there are many factors on which Indus civilization is unique. I will come to those factors. But then the civilization declines. After 700 years, civilization declines, and after 1700 BC, the civilization, we do not find any urban settlement. So the first city of the world, not only of India, the first city of the world, Harappa, Mohenjo-daro, Rakhigari, Dholavira, all these cities, they perished, and the next city emerged only hundreds of years later when Mauryas came to power, Patliputra, the capital of Magad. So what happened in these next 100 of years? So this is also very important to understand that historical development also occurs because of coincidences. Maybe there were some favorable factors. Climatic conditions were suitable. Someone had developed a hybridized crop, because of that suddenly rice production exploded, and that led to agricultural surplus. But then climatic conditions declined. Climatic conditions became adverse. There was a drought, there was flood, some disasters occurred, and civilization did perish. So historical development जो है, that also depends upon lot of coincidences, lot of luck is involved. That is also true for every one of us. For example, बहुत बार हम stories पढ़ते हैं, inspiring stories of people who, despite so much adversity, achieved so much. Often, but I always feel that even though a lot of such stories are very inspiring, but we should also do not reject the element of luck. जैसे एक सिंपल सा, मैं इनफैक्ट आप यूपीएससी की तैयारी कर रहे हैं, आप पिछले 4-5 साल के जो टॉपर्स हैं टॉप 10 में, उनके जाके प्रीलिम्स के मार्क्स देख लेना. एक मार्क्स से प्रीलिम्स क्वालिफाई करा लोगों ने, एंड देन दे वेंट ऑन टू बिकम टॉपर. एक क्वेश्चन अगर गलत करते, एंड नोबडी नोज द आंसर टू ऑल ऑफ द क्वेश्चंस, यू ऑल हैव टू ऑप्टिमाइज योर स्कोर. 100 क्वेश्चन आएंगे प्रीलिम्स में, आउट ऑफ दैट 100, इफ योर प्रिपरेशन इज रियली वेल, you will know answer to 40 questions exactly. Some questions you will know some part, but you do not know all the parts. You will be able to eliminate few options. There will be at least 10 to 15 questions, minimum 10 questions, जिसका clue भी नहीं होगा आपको. कि यहाँ पे हम क्या आंसर करें, कितना भी आप पेपर अटेम्प्ट कर लो, आप विजन आईएएस के सारे टेस्ट सीरीज लगा लेना, 10,000 क्वेश्चन अटेम्प्ट कर लोगे, तब भी होगा ये. देखो, the sooner you accept this reality, the better it is for you as an aspirant. So every good aspirant tries to optimize the score. That is, I know some answers, I know few of the answers, rest of the answers I have to optimize. Optimize in the sense that using my partial knowledge, I have to eliminate options and arrive at the right answer. तो ये कैसे आएगा? अब ये तुक्के से नहीं आता है. इसका मतलब ये नहीं कि हम पढ़ना छोड़ दें. ये you have to study things again and again. The more you study, the more papers you solve, your elimination skills improve, your aptitude develops, your aptitude of answering prelims question that develops. So anyways, this is a part about preparation. But as I was saying, that look at UPSC toppers who will go on to become the top bureaucrats of the country. And lot of people barely qualified prelims examination. एक क्वेश्चन उन्होंने गलत मार्क करा होता तो नहीं करते prelims qualify, right? So there is also an element of luck. So even for an individual, I was reading recently a book called Psychology of Money. This book talks about the element of luck. So it talks about Bill Gates. Bill Gates, the richest person in the world, not right now, but he remained richest person in the world for a very long period of time. The book traces his story that in his school there was a computer. And it was only one school out of the entire state of California. There were like 4 or 5 schools which had computer. His school had a computer. That is such a coincidence. And because of that, he developed an interest in computers, developed an interest in computer programming, and he became the richest person in the world. So there is always an element of luck in an individual development. We have to be very humble because of that, right? And at the same time, even for historical development, for civilizational development, when a civilization reaches its zenith and it perishes, a lot of factors, we often say ki because of their inherent weakness in character or because they did not do this or did not do that. But luck also plays a very important role. Fortune plays a very important role. So Indus Valley civilization declined. The most prevailing theory right now is that it declined because of a significant drought and change in monsoon pattern. It did not decline because of invasion by Aryans. Aryans did came to this country, but much later, few hundred years later, when the civilization was already on the path of decline, right? So luck plays an important role. So civilization, how civilizations come into existence? The second theory here, that there is suddenly an exponential growth, that is a more acceptable theory. That things seem incremental for many thousands of years, but suddenly things change. However, in last few hundred years, we have defied all these odds. The human beings they have emerged as the largest predators of the planet. We have had a exponential growth for very long period of time because of our technological advancement. But that is something which you will study in ecology, environment and ecology. Give the heading, Indus Valley Civilization. Indus Valley Civilization. Indus Valley Civilization. I am going to use the word shortcut IVC, बार-बार IV Indus Valley Civilization लिखने के बजाय. So IVC emerged around 3300 BCE. 3300 BCE and declined by 1300 BCE. Declined by 1300 BCE. It extended from 1300 modern day northeast Afghanistan, modern day northeast Afghanistan to Pakistan and northwest India. Modern day northeast Afghanistan to Pakistan to northwest India. It is often separated into three phases. It is often separated into three phases. Early phase. So why the Indus Valley civilization को बहुत बार Harappan civilization भी बोलते हैं. The reason is the Harappa was the first city which was discovered. Okay. Mohenjo-daro was the second city. Both Harappa and Mohenjo-daro are right now in Pakistan. So early Harappan phase from 3300 to 2600 BC. देखो जो early phase है, this is rural phase. यहाँ पे urban settlement in the later part of 2600, around 2600, the urban settlement had started. तो जो हम पढ़ते हैं as a civilization, what we study is the mature phase, which existed from 2600 BCE to 1900 BCE, and from 1900 to 1300. So this is the time when the civilization started declining. In fact, by 1700 BC, all the urban settlements, they were as part of ruin, and people had shifted to Ganga Doab region. A lot of people shifted to southern India, which is known as late phase. At its peak, write down, at its peak, the civilization may have had a population over 5 million people. The civilization may have had a population of over 5 million people. Five million people may have had, again this is only a guess, may have had over 5 million people. Because there are a lot of features of Indus Valley civilization which is quite unique compared to the contemporary civilizations. For example, Mesopotamian civilization. Let's say Indus Valley I am going to talk about outstanding features of civilization. A lot of those features you will need to remember. तो ये तो चलो फिर भी वो तो फिर भी ठीक है, फीचर्स याद रखना फिर भी ठीक है. Another factual information which you need to remember is that important sites, what they are known for and where they are right now. So ये factual information prelims के लिए काफी useful है. So I'm going to give you a list. वहाँ पे कुछ analysis नहीं है, just that the sites where they are right now, what they are right now known for. तो ये बस चीजें हमको पता होनी चाहिए. But before that we need to know about their urban plan. Why this civilization is studied with such a keen interest. So urban planning, because of the fact that they had standard weights and measures, because of the fact that they had technological development in trade routes. For example, they were trading with Mesopotamians, Babylonians, Oman. So thousands of kilometers away they were trading. Because how do we know that? Because we have found the seals of Indus Valley civilization at these sites, right? So we are going to study all of these features. But few things which are very unique about Indus Valley civilization is that maybe it was a egalitarian society. Egalitarian society in the sense the social inequality was not very huge. जैसे in modern times, even in modern times when you study reports like by Oxfam एक report publish करती है about inequality. And they tell you that few billionaires own more than 40-50% of the world's wealth. So same is not true So this social inequality is a feature across the world, across space, across time. But in Indus Valley civilization, we find that of course social hierarchies and social differences must be there. उसके बिना हम imagine नहीं कर सकते. But more or less, perhaps wealth was equally distributed. At all the cities, there is a common feature that at the center of the city there is a citadel. Citadel perhaps may have people who are in authority. For example, kings and queens or nobles. We do not know if they had kings or queens. We also do not know that if all these different sites are interlinked. For example, if there is a central authority or two central authority or three central authority which ruled over all the sites, or maybe all the cities emerged as a separate city and all of them had their own governance system, all municipal councils which were taking care of public infrastructure. That is the second very unique feature of Indus Valley civilization. They invested a lot into their public infrastructure. They were more interested, for example, on sanitation, on cleanliness, on plumbing work. The roads cut at right angle. Every house was connected to a wastewater canal which was covered properly. Right? They were very serious about their privacy. How do we know that? Because how they made their doors and windows. Okay. So these are some of the features which you do not find anywhere. That they were more interested in public infrastructure rather than building great monuments and temples. All civilization has this feature that they will have great buildings and great temples because kings and queens, they often used God to assert their authority over people, that they are the representative of God on the earth. And to show that authority, they often invested a lot into building great temples and great monuments. Same is not true in the case of Indus Valley civilization. Even though the towns were fortified, there was some defense system, but we do not find evidences of any long-standing army or some elaborate preparation where people are trying to attack some other civilization or they are defending from some great enemies. Maybe geography played a role because India is not easily accessible, except northwest frontier where they actually were situated. India is not accessible, right? Himalaya, Indian Ocean. So we do not know the reason, but they did not invest a lot into grand buildings and grand monuments. We do not have a answer to what type of legal code they followed, what type of governance system they had. But from seals, a lot of seals have been found at Indus Valley civilization sites. You find that there is almost zero evidence of human on human violence. If violence, let's say one seal where a woman is being flanked by two men, again that is being interpreted a lot, that we do not know what does it mean. Apart from that, maybe it means some violence, but apart from that we have no evidence, or maybe she is being escorted by these two gentlemen, we do not know. So again, there are different interpretations. But apart from that, there is no element of violence presented at any of the Indus Valley sites. While same cannot be said for other civilizations. If you look at different civilizations, for example, think about Egyptian civilization. They invested so much into these grand mummies. Right? When pharaohs died, kings died, that in itself was a celebration, or it was a sorrow, moment of sorrow, whatever, but elaborate preparation went on to their afterlife. These people thought that it doesn't make any sense. People of Indus Valley civilization thought that it doesn't make any sense to keep luxury goods, jewelries and other slaves. जब king pharaohs मरते थे तो उनके साथ slaves को भी खत्म मार के वहाँ पे डालते थे कि they will serve in his afterlife. People of Indus Valley civilization did not think that it has any sense. But at the same time, this is more interesting, they were proper businessmen. At the same time, we find that things which were manufactured at some of these sites, they are part of their religious celebration. So they knew that there is a demand there. They supplied that demand, but they did not follow the same protocols, same religious ideas. So these are some of the outstanding features of Indus Valley civilization. However, we shouldn't say that there is no social, again I will repeat, we cannot say that there is no social hierarchy. There definitely is some sort of social hierarchy, there is some sort of governance. presence of citadel, presence of some of burial sites where some luxury goods, not all, but few luxury goods have been found. So burial sites again, as I told you, mortuary analysis इसको बोलते हैं. It gives you some idea about a particular civilization. So just give this heading, features of Indus Valley civilization. Features of Indus Valley civilization. This is the location of Mehergarh anyways. This is the area where you find sites of Indus Valley civilization. A lot of important sites, for example, Dhaulavira, Lothal in India, Rakhigari, which is in Haryana. Very important sites in India. At the same time, Harappa and Mohenjo-daro in Pakistan. I will show you some more pictures. For example, this is the picture of a great public bath at Mohenjo-daro. So a lot of investment occurred into their public infrastructure. This is a picture of water reservoir at Dhaulavira, which is in Gujarat. Lot of investment occurred into water storage system, into wastewater treatment. This is the picture of Lothal, even though we do not find a lot, but look at the symmetry of construction and look at the type of bricks they used, the uniformity in size and the materials they used. Because, just for example, look at this. This is Great Bath at Mohenjo-daro. This is water reservoir. Now this is moisture proof bricks, right? Otherwise they would have perished. They still have survived after thousands of years. So that tells a lot about their technological advancement. Or look at the uniformity in things. This is a seal, a very famous seal known as Proto-Shiva, often known as Proto-Shiva, a person with horns, some animals surrounding him. So some sort of deity perhaps, some sort of religious god which they worshipped. We also have found pictures of Mother Goddess who is goddess of fertility. Other seals, for example, these seals represent different type of animals. These seals were used for trade, for example, to stamp a good. These seals have been found at many other sites across the world. That tells you the trade routes of Indus Valley civilization. Shell working. They had manufacturing facilities for taking shells and giving them very interesting shapes. Right? So their artistic capability is unmatched. This is the picture of what they wrote. We have not been able to decipher what they are writing here. But this is known as 10 Indus script. We do not know what it represents. It remains undecipherable. But this is how they wrote. And we find such type of writing across many sites. Maybe very soon it will be deciphered because a lot of researchers are using artificial intelligence, and maybe it will be deciphered very soon and we will have more idea. So it is a emerging development. Whatever we know from archaeological surveys, from our imaginations. But once we have some literary source to confirm that, maybe a lot of existing beliefs will be challenged, new beliefs will come into existence. But for that we will have to wait. Anyways, the first outstanding feature, write down. The first outstanding feature is urban infrastructure and architecture. Urban infrastructure. I will get these slides uploaded, do not worry. Right on here. The Indus cities are noted for their urban planning. The Indus cities are noted for their urban planning. A technical and political process. A technical and political process concerned with the use of a technical and political process concerned with the use of land and design of urban environment. Land and design of the urban environment. Write down in next bullet point. They are noted for their baked brick houses. They are noted for their baked brick houses. Elaborate drainage systems. Elaborate drainage systems. Water supply systems. Elaborate drainage systems, water supply systems, and clusters of large non-residential buildings. And clusters of large non-residential buildings. Roads were, write down next bullet point, roads were built with symmetry. Roads were built with symmetry, cutting at right angles. Roads were built with symmetry, cutting at right angles. Next point, the central area of cities often features a citadel. The central area of a city often features a citadel. A citadel. The central area of a city often features a citadel, a fortified area with defensive structures. Fortified area with defensive structures. A fortified area with defensive structures. There are, write on next point, there are evidences of trash collection system. Trash collection system. Public baths. Public baths. And granaries. And granaries to store surplus grain. To store surplus grain. Write down in next paragraph. The quality of urban planning. The quality of urban planning suggests a efficient municipal government. A municipal governments suggests efficient municipal governments. Efficient municipal governments that placed a high priority on hygiene. That placed a high priority on hygiene. And एक last point लिख लेना. Like other civilizations, Unlike other civilizations, not like, unlike other civilizations, Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, ancient Egypt, the people of IVC, the people of IVC did not build large monuments and structures. Did not build large monumental structures. Unlike other civilizations, Mesopotamia and ancient Egypt, the people of IVC did not build large monumental structures. Give the next heading, innovation and technology. Innovation and technology. Again, write down in bullet points. This includes great accuracy. This includes great accuracy. Great accuracy in their systems and tools. In their systems and tools for measuring length and mass. Great accuracy in their systems and tools for measuring length and mass. Fire baked bricks. Raman is asking, is it the fourth point? No, this is a next feature. अभी तक हम urban planning की बात कर रहे थे. I'm talking about the next feature now, which is innovation and technology. Fire baked bricks which were uniform in size. Fire baked bricks which were uniform in size and moisture resistant were used in building public infrastructure. The sewage and drainage system. The sewage and drainage system of IVC was unmatched In fact, a lot of people believe that जो IVC का जो sewage और drainage system है, it is better than current sewage system of India. Right on next point. Individual homes drew water from wells. Individual homes drew water from wells. While wastewater was directed to covered drains on the main street. While wastewater was directed to covered drains on the main street. Individual homes drew water from wells while wastewater was directed to covered drains on the main street. This further concludes that cleanliness was a matter of great importance. That cleanliness was a matter of great importance. Cleanliness was a matter of great importance. Seal carving, इसी में next point. Seal carving. The cutting of patterns. The cutting of patterns into bottom face of a seal, a small and carved object, which was used for stamping, which was used for stamping. Distinctive seals were used for the identification of property and to stamp clay on traded goods. And एक last point इसमें लिख लेना. Many seals were decorated with animal figures. Many seals were decorated with animal figures such as elephants, tigers, buffaloes, and even unicorns. Unicorn is a mythical animal. Even unicorns. A horse with a horn. Cows are not present, by the way. This is very interesting. जो इंडस वैली सील्स अभी तक जो भी मिले हैं वहाँ पे cow, we have not found seal of a cow. Not even horse exactly. But we have found, for example, again, I will tell you a very, it's an unfortunate thing. UPSC asks some questions of ancient history from, because they can pick any book, right? They are not bound to ask a question from R.S. Sharma. So they can pick any book. And they often pick books which were written in 1970s, where we had some idea about Indus Valley civilization, but lot of ideas were not well developed. इसका एक बहुत बढ़िया एग्जांपल मैं आपको देता हूँ. There was a question in 2017, I think, where Indus Valley civilization and Vedic civilization was compared. ये prelims का question था. So some statements were, of course, उसमें कोई controversy नहीं था. एक statement there was a lot of controversy. The statement was that people of Indus Valley civilization had no idea about horse. Something I am paraphrasing. So now R.S. Sharma and in fact many textbooks write that at some sites we have found bones of horses. So this statement does not seem correct, right? But जो पूरा question था, if you go and type some keywords of that question, you will find a Google book. I remember it because I did it. I was one of the people who was preparing the answer key of Vision IS. And I remember reading this paragraph where it was exactly all the statements were picked from that paragraph, that comparison between Indus Valley civilization and Vedic civilization. एंड उसमें एक स्टेटमेंट ये था दैट हॉर्सेज वेर नॉट नोन टू पीपल ऑफ इंडस वैली सिविलाइजेशन. So I actually told people that UPSC does pick random statements from random books, and इसका आंसर जो होगा they will mark this as a correct statement. But because we use R.S. Sharma as more authentic source, as a more relevant source, finally we went with that this statement is wrong, that Indus Valley civilization people did know about horses. But in UPSC official answer key, this statement was considered correct, that they did not know. So that is frankly unfortunate. There are hundreds of books written on ancient and medieval India. Many of these books are outdated. They were written in 1960s, 70s, even before that. If you pick stuff from there, then they of course have not included recent discoveries. That is frankly unfortunate. Hanji. Sorry? We have to? विजनाइज का मटेरियल है एंशिएंट हिस्ट्री के लिए? नहीं, मुझे नहीं पता, आई डोंट थिंक है. तो क्यों चाहिए आपको मटेरियल? मतलब थोड़े बुक्स पढ़ने की आदत डालो, बुक्स न्यूज़पेपर्स ये पढ़ने की आदत डालो. ये बने बनाए मटेरियल इवन दो इट इज ऑफ विजनाइज इस पे थोड़ा कम रिलाई. ऑफ कोर्स दीज आर गुड सोर्सेज टू स्टडी विथ रिस्पेक्ट टू योर प्रिपरेशन. जैसे फॉर एग्जांपल, प्लीज डोंट टॉक, प्लीज डोंट, अगर बात करना है क्लास के बाद करना. सो देयर इज दिस न्यू ट्रेंड कि सब कुछ हमको बना बनाया समरी चाहिए, मंथ वीकली न्यूज़पेपर का समरी चाहिए, डेली चाहिए, मंथली चाहिए, right? These are important sources. I am not denying it. They are very useful, but they are only complementary sources. They should complement your primary sources, which are do go and read newspaper by yourself. जो स्टैंडर्ड टेक्स्ट बुक्स है उनको खुद से पढ़ो जाके, राइट? जैसे आर एस शर्मा खुद से पढ़ो एक बार जाके. सो दीज आर नॉट सब जो विजनाइज मटेरियल हो गया, जैसे वैल्यू एडेड मटेरियल है. फॉर फ्यू थिंग्स वैल्यू एडेड मटेरियल इज वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट where there is no standard textbook. For example, internal security or ethics, integrity and aptitude. All these books were written after the syllabus was introduced. So in these subjects definitely refer to value added material. But subjects where, for example, for history, for geography, यहाँ पे standard textbooks available हैं. So go and read that. Read newspaper. In fact, that is very important. Newspaper पढ़ो. And complement that knowledge with whatever you are studying in monthly magazine or daily news analysis or weekly analysis, whatever. Anyways, next is metallurgy. So इसी में हम बात करें, innovation and technology में ही बात करें अभी भी हम. So next is metallurgy will be discussed in detail in art and culture classes. Lot of statues, lost wax technique, all these things will be discussed in art and culture classes. But here you should know, it is considered a Bronze Age society. It is considered a Bronze Age society where people had developed new techniques in metallurgy, where people had developed new techniques in metallurgy. Metals like copper, bronze, metals like copper, bronze, lead and tin were known. Metals like copper, bronze, lead and tin were known. Not iron. Iron was not known. Iron we only know much later, hundreds of years after Indus Valley civilization. Trade routes. Trade, if the next study इसी में trade. Evidence shows that they participated in vast maritime sea trade, they means people of IVC, that they participated in a vast maritime sea trade, extending from Central Asia to Middle East. Extending from Central Asia to Middle East. To Middle East. This was facilitated by advances in transport technology. Advances in transport technology. There's a lot of things, for example, boats, ox carts. Ox carts are even today used in many Indian villages. So that was used during IVC, Indus Valley Civilization, as well as boats, they were used. Shell working, इसी में एक next point लिखना, shell working. हाँ जी, हाँ, ox carts were there. No. So ox carts, which animals pulled? We have evidences of wheels and we have evidences of animals pulling these wheels. But again, what animals? That is something which cannot be answered. Okay. So ox cart. When I said, I am not saying that use of ox, but बैल गाड़ी जो हम word use करते हैं, right? So, but yes, they had a wheel system. They had carts, round wheels, different animals pulled. We do not know that. This is, for example, जैसे ये भी, this is also very interesting. When I say that we have not found seals with cows, it doesn't mean that cows are not there, right? So that is only, ये सिर्फ जैसे अगर क्वेश्चन आता है that which of the following animals are part of Indus Valley civilization seals, वहां पे अगर cow option है तो गलत है होगा. But saying that they had no knowledge of cow or cow was not domesticated, I am not sure if we can come to that conclusion. Okay? So वो जो statement मैंने लिखा था वो that was only for the seals and all the animals जिसके हमको मिले हैं stamping on these seals, वो उसके लिए सर, ठीक है? Anyways, shells were used in crafts. Shells, seashells basically. Shells were used in crafts. And एक last line इसमें लिख लेना, other traded goods included terracotta pots, terracotta figurines we will discuss in art and culture. Terracotta pots, gold, silver, seashells, pearls, sea pearl, pearls, and colored gemstones, such as lapis lazuli. Across the history, आप सर्च करके देखना है, ब्लू कलर का एक स्टोन होता है, very beautiful stone which is called lapis lazuli. Across the history you will find evidences of this stone being traded in the world, and it actually goes back to Indus Valley civilization. And a last feature is religion and culture. Religion and culture. The Indus script, right down here, the Indus script remains indecipherable, remains indecipherable, indecipherable, and thus a topic of speculation, and thus a topic of speculation, thus a topic of speculation. However, few conclusions have been drawn, few conclusions have been drawn based on archaeological sources. Few conclusions have been drawn based on archaeological sources. Based on archaeological sources. For example, maybe people worshipped a mother goddess, maybe people worshipped a mother goddess who symbolized fertility. Who symbolized fertility. विशाल इज आस्किंग आईवीसी के लोगों ने गोल्ड कैसे निकाला होगा जैसे हम निकालते हैं अभी माइनिंग करके. So they must have found some mines here and there. Those mines had gold. They must have realized that this metal is a lustrous metal which has perhaps some value, right? So we'll have to assume that they had developed some sort of mining techniques. Fire altars have been found at some sites. Fire altars have been found at some sites. Fire altars. हवन कुंड टाइप समझ लो ऐसे. Fire altars have been found at some sites, which signifies some ritualistic practice. Which signifies some ritualistic practice. एक नेक्स्ट पैराग्राफ में लिखना, we have no immediate answers. We have no immediate answers regarding center of authority. Regarding center of authority. The legal codes which were followed. The legal codes which were followed. Or if all of the sites of IVC were ruled by one central authority, or a number of leaders represented each of the urban centers, or a number of leaders represented each of the urban centers. it is also widely believed, that the people were peaceful, and did not engage in any major warfare. Did not engage in any major warfare. Did not engage in any major warfare. अब again देखो, this is only a belief as of now. We have no way of knowing if this belief is true or not. But based on archaeological surveys, whatever we have dug till now, it seems logical. Because अगर ऐसे होता तो fortification बहुत huge fortifications होते, long standing army होता, monuments होते, ऐसी चीजें हमको मिली नहीं है. Right? So again, this is educated guess. Maybe because of geography, maybe because they had no enemies, or maybe perhaps at this point of time जो civilizational warfare है, it did not exist. जो empire का concept होता है, kingdom versus empire में difference होता है, right? जो empire का concept है, maybe this concept of empire has not come into existence till now. There must have been conflicts. We cannot assume human civilization without conflict. But did this conflict lead to a major warfare? All evidences till now suggest that no, it did not. However, we'll have to wait for deciphering of script. Maybe they will shed some more light here. Last bullet point लिखना, decline of IVC. हाँ जी. That will be very difficult. That will be very difficult conclusion to make. Sorry? हाँ, there. So for example, phallus worship is also there. Ling worship जिसको हम बोलते हैं. We have also found evidences of ling worship, right? Or for example, we find the evidence of proto Shiva. So concluding that it was a matriarchal society, that will be a far-fetched conclusion. Okay. Anyways, decline. The prevailing theory few decades ago was that there was another warlike tribe which came from West Asian, Central Asian region known as Aryans. Aryan basically depict a linguistic group, people who spoke common languages. So Aryan is not an ethnic group, not a race. It is a linguistic group which perhaps comprised of many races. So Aryans came, and because these people are defenseless, they do not have a standing army, they were mainly merchants, they did not have huge forts, so they were easily captured. And now these people of Indus Valley civilization, are forced to shift to southern part of the country. So this was a prevailing theory, but there is in fact almost zero evidence. There must have been some sort of conflict. For example, even though abhi jo prevailing theory hai, that climatic conditions jo hai, that declined. For example, the Saraswati river started drying up. So Indus and tributaries along with Saraswati. For example, we know that Saraswati did exist, but it dried up. So perhaps the gradual process of drying up had already started. The rainfall pattern had changed, maybe because of change in monsoon pattern. And these regions were no longer as fertile as it was. So now people are forced to move towards other regions of the country. For example, a lot of people shifted towards Ganga Doab region. Many people shifted to the southern part of the country. And only after a few hundred years, a new set of people came, known as Aryans. अब ऐसा नहीं है कि Aryans जब आए होंगे तो सब कुछ smoothly गया होगा. There must have been some sort of conflict. So there must have been, and we know that there was some sort of conflict which we'll discuss as part of Vedic literature. It does tell you some sort of conflict, but it does not mean that there was any large-scale invasion which took place. Migration definitely happened. And there are so many evidences of migration. Population genetics, as I told you, is a very good evidence. But apart from the fact that how language evolved, so linguistic analysis, so Indo-Aryan languages हैं, lot of things, as I told you, जैसे जो मैंने sound, thought, talk का बताया था, this only exists in South Asia. So people of Indus Valley civilization, maybe they had similar sound. While this is not present in other Indo-European languages. So even though Sanskrit is part of a larger Indo-European language, it also interacted with, and again, when I use the word Sanskrit or Tamil or any other ancient languages, we should understand that ऐसा नहीं कि किसी एक time पे suddenly Sanskrit is here. Development of a language is a very gradual process. The language, study of language in itself is a scientific discipline which we study as linguistic analysis. Okay? So, अभी जो prevailing theory है that the civilization declined because of a significant drought, and that drought occurred for many years. Because of that, people were forced to migrate, and gradually the urban centers were deserted, and again the settlement, जो resulting settlement था, that became a rural settlement which is known as late Harappan phase. And by 1700, around 1700 BC, all the cities were deserted and rural we do find evidences of some rural settlement. हाँ जी.
Can we conclude in religious culture factors में वो medications और cosmetics?
बिल्कुल कर. So religious में तो नहीं, but cosmetics तो बहुत ज़्यादा बहुत popular था Indus Valley civilization में. He is asking about cosmetics, and what was the other thing? Medicines. So I am very sure that they must have invested a lot into their medicine system also. Is it similar to the modern medicine, for example? Is it similar to Ayurveda or Siddha? That we have no evidence of. But yes, we have evidences of cosmetics. For example, a lot of cosmetic products were popular even during the time of Indus Valley civilization, and we have evidences of that. Things like powder or lipstick, they have been found. Anyways, there is a question by Drashti. Drashti is asking, in reference to the ancient past, what is the difference between village and cities? Village and cities तो हमने define करा है ना, कि this was a rural settlement and this was a urban settlement. तो हमारा जो definition उसी को हम apply कर रहे हैं. So clearly we do not know what they thought about different type of settlement. So the difference between rural settlement and urban settlement is what we use today. Much more population density, of course, will be a very important feature of urban settlement. Some sort of governance, city governance, some sort of municipality, right? More culturally more advanced, for example, some cultural centers, places of higher learning. All these things, better roads, such things can be attributed to urban settlement. So we have defined this rural and urban. तो अभी जो हमारा definition है, we apply the same definition to Indus Valley civilization also. Anyways, write down here. One theory suggested in bullet point, write down in first bullet point. One theory suggested that a nomadic Indo-European tribe called the Aryans invaded and conquered Indus Valley civilization. Called the Aryans invaded and conquered the Indus Valley civilization. Though more recent evidences contradict this claim. Though more recent evidences contradict this claim. Write down the next point. Many scholars believe that the decline was due to climate change a significant drought over years which may have started the process of drying of Saraswati river, which may have started the process of drying of Saraswati river, which may have started the process of drying of Saraswati river, caused the urban settlements to decline. Climate grew cooler and drier. Climate grew cooler and drier. Climate grew cooler and drier, and a tectonic event may have diverted or disrupted river systems. The people, last line एक लिख लेना, the people may have migrated towards east and south. The people may have migrated towards east and south. And by around 1700 BCE, the cities of IVC had been abandoned. That's it. जो एक कुछ factual चीजें हैं, important sites, what they are known for, I will get a handout uploaded rather than making you write that. I will get a handout uploaded, एक page का एक PDF होगा, but that is again an important handout. You can expect a question in prelims examination on, say for example, they will ask sites in which states they are, or sites what they are known for, and they will ask to match this pair. In next class, so we will end today's class here. In next class we will start with Vedic civilization. So I will see you next week.